All right, I'm in the Gospel of John, chapter 18. And in the previous message, I was talking about the conversation that Jesus was having with Pilate. And this, of course, was a big deal. There was a lot going on. And so in this message, I'm going to go through it again, but I'm going to talk about some different things. When there is a lot happening in a section in the Scriptures, it has to be kind of taken in layers sometimes because there's just a lot that could be understood and recognized by what's taking place. And if I tell you too much at one time, then it can be distracting and you can miss out on some of the important details that are present there. So I'm going to go through this again and talk about some other things that are present here. And then I'll proceed into John chapter 19. I'll finish up John chapter 18 and make my way into chapter 19. So I'm going to begin in verse 33, the conversation that Pilate was having with Jesus. In John chapter 18, verse 33, it says, "Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' Jesus answered him, 'Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?'" And in the previous message, I was explaining that Jesus was not going to just testify against himself. He responded to Pilate by asking for some more clarification on just what does he mean by that. And of course, do you have any witnesses? You know, is this your accusation against me? Is this somebody else's accusation against me? Because Pilate doesn't have an accusation. No one will tell him why Jesus is there. That was what I was talking about in the previous message. He asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Now, Jesus never really answers this question, all right? Not in a direct way. He answers it in an indirect way, but he never says it in a direct way. And I think this is important to recognize because he isn't just the king of the Jews. All right? I mean, he is in a certain sense, of course, by his genealogy, by the circumstances, by covenant, by stuff like that. Then you could say, you know, that's fine. It's not wrong to say that he is the king of the Jews. That's not wrong. Of course, that is true. All right? But that's not all there is to say about the idea of Jesus being a king. That's not all there is to say about it. He's not just the king of the Jews. He is the king of kings. He is the king of every king. He's the king of every person, whether they are a Jew or they are not a Jew. He is the king. All right? And this seems to be left out in a lot of discussions about Jesus being the king. But this is the way things really are. Jesus was God manifested in the flesh, and the living God is, of course, the God of the universe, of all that exists, all that we could recognize as being defined because he has created all things. And so when he presents himself in this way to live as a man and in order to accomplish the tasks that he decided were important to him, you know, that's just a representation of who our God really is as a person. And he is the king, but he is not just the king of the Jews. He's the king of the Gentiles. He's Pilate's king, you know. And the way that he expresses this is by saying that his kingdom is not of this world. That's a way of saying, in an indirect way, that of course he is the king over the world, but his kingdom is not of that world, of the world that they knew, of the world that they recognized, of the world that they understood. That's effectively what he was communicating to Pilate. In addition to that, to express to him that he's not there in order to overthrow the Roman authority. He's not there for that reason. He's just visiting. He's like a king from out of town in this context. Of course, the day is eventually going to come when he does that, but this is not what he's doing right now because there are other things that are more important, such as, can he produce children of God, right? By people surrendering to, embracing the new covenant, Are they going to be born again by the Spirit by believing the truth of the gospel? This is something that he is actively doing, has been actively doing for a long time. That is what his ministry is about, and that's what the creation of this world was about. So for him to assert himself as the king over the entire world in the way that people would in general understand is going to be non-productive. In fact, it will get in the way. All right? It will get in the way of him obtaining people by faith. All right? It will just simply interfere with that because people are going to see him and they're going to embrace him by force. All right? Because, of course, he's present. He's physically there. People do not have a way of refusing to acknowledge him. People don't have a way of refusing the gospel. We need that in order for people to accept the gospel because they want to have a relationship with him because they want to, instead of having a relationship with him because they really don't have a choice, because there he is. All right? So the way that he did this was he said that there is a kingdom, and the kingdom, if it's not of this world, then by default, of course, it is of heaven. That's the kingdom. All right? It is the kingdom of heaven. All right? And so by expressing that, by saying that this is the kingdom, that this is the kingdom that he is the king of, well then, by default, anything that would be governed by the decisions that are being made in heaven, he is by default a king over everyone in that respect as well. All right? And so that's what he's describing to Pilate in a way, by saying, my kingdom is not of this world, as I'll read in just a moment. He is saying that, well, he's not saying that he's not the king of the Jews, because that would be wrong. But he is saying that he is the king, in effect, of not only the Jews, but of everybody else. And you're going to figure this out eventually. All right? This is going to show itself at a certain point. So let me proceed from there. In verse 34, again, Jesus answered, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Verse 35, Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, he then answers the question, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth." All right, so he makes a paradigm shift from, I'm a king, but for this reason I am here, and that is to present the truth. All right, so he makes this paradigm shift from the topic of him being a king to the subject of truth. This becomes his personal conversation with Pilate. All right, so as I explained just a moment ago, God's objective is to have people who turn to him and who have a relationship with him because they want to, because they really want to know their God. And if you haven't noticed, he's made this kind of difficult. He's made it a little bit challenging. All right, there is tremendous competition in the world that prevents people, or not prevents, but kind of gets in the way of people considering the reality that God even exists at all. All right, so he's made it quite a challenge. And considering how difficult it is for people to even consider the question, is there a God at all? And if there is, then you got another question you have to overcome. Do I want to know who this God is? There are going to be very few people who will make it that far. Very few. But of those who do are going to eventually, those very few, will have a relationship with him because they really want to. You got to really want to know God. All right, you got to really want to know him to find out who he is, if you haven't noticed. It's a tremendous amount of effort in many ways. And you have to let go of other things in life sometimes in order to take the time and effort out of your life experience to pursue an understanding of who he is. Otherwise, you know, at best, you're just kind of pretending that you know him, but you probably don't. All right? And when you consider the competition of the world in the sense of the alternatives that you could use your life for, your time for, your experience for, you know, there are very few people who will turn to him. But from his point of view, all right, so there's not going to be that many. But you know, of those few that he does get, these are going to be the quality people. These are going to be the people that he really wants to have a relationship with and to have in his life forever. All right, these are the kinds of people that he wants. So in creating the world in the way that he did, he created a world that eventually, you know, the people decided to abandon him, reject him. We have this world of conflict. We have this world of difficulty, of struggle, and of suffering. But this is the kind of environment that will then produce few people who will turn to him because they want to. And these people have to turn to him because they have an interest in the truth. All right? If you are not a person who has an interest in the truth, if that is not important to you, and I mean that in the sense that it's got to be more important to you than other things. If it's not important enough, all right, then you're not going to make it. You know, I mean, you're just simply not going to be one of those kinds of people who will have a relationship with him for the right reasons. Because the truth means that there is going to be something real between you and your God. That's what it means. If the relationship is based on truth, then it is a relationship that is real. All right? Again, let me say this again because it's important. A relationship based on truth is a relationship that is real. And you have a real God who wants to have relationships with people, but he wants to have real ones. You know, I mean, you might be able to relate to this, that you may perhaps have some people in your life who you have a relationship with, and they're just not very honest with you. You know, they're just not. They lie to you a lot. They try to manipulate you a lot. All right? And after a while, eventually, you're going to come to the point where you recognize that this relationship that you have with them is just not based on reality. It's just all about them lying to you. You know, and the way that they relate to you, you thought that maybe you were important to them. You know, they gave you that impression. You thought that maybe they liked you. They kind of gave you that impression, but they don't. You know, they don't like you. You're not important to them. They are only trying to get into your life for other reasons, usually because they want to take something from you. You know, you have something that they want. And so the only thing that's on their mind is what lies do they need to tell you in order to get whatever it is you have for themselves. And that is not a real relationship in the sense of the kind of relationship that you probably thought you had or the kind of relationship that you want. All right, now the way that God has structured things, he has very well protected himself from people like that. You know, people are not going to be able to just have a relationship with him so that he'll just do whatever they want him to do or give them whatever he's got. You know, if you haven't noticed that, he's done that. That's what he has done. And you know, are not going to be able to protect yourself like God can protect himself, of course, but still, you know, that is a way of understanding that you have a God who wants something real. All right? And if you want to have a real relationship with another person, all right, if you want something real, well, you know, if you find someone who can be in your life that's going to have something real with you, consider yourself to be quite fortunate, and that's kind of unusual in many ways. And I say that not just because of my own personal experiences, but because I've interacted with a lot of people for a long time. You know, this is what I do. And this is just the normal struggle of life. So the invitation that God gives you is an invitation to have something real with somebody. All right? And the kind of relationship that you can have with him is the kind that you will never have with anyone else. Because from his point of view, the idea of having something real with somebody else is, of course, more important than probably anything. So when you pursue your God, when you engage with your God through prayer or through study or through listening or talking, however you are engaging with him, do keep that in mind. That what he is genuinely interested in is something that's real, and it's going to be based on the truth. Okay? In the world, the truth has very little relevance. All right? Like I said, in comparison, there are very few people who really have an interest in the truth. All right? And of course, the main reason why is because it's much easier to live in the lie. It's much easier to lie to people than it is to tell them the truth. It's much easier to manipulate and deceive people than it is to try to have something genuine and real with them. And so because it's just easier, all right, people will generally default to that. When they come to you, when they engage with you, what they're really thinking is, what lie do I need to tell this person now? Okay, what is the next lie in order to keep things kind of going? What is the next lie that somebody, sometimes I struggle with that. When people come to me, that's what can come to my mind is, all right, what is the next lie they're going to tell me now? And that's not a healthy kind of relationship with people. But it's hard to find people who don't relate to you that way. And so you have to keep that in mind. All right? So the truth is harder. Okay? It is. It's harder. It's more of a struggle, especially in these kinds of scenarios. You have to really make the decision with conviction that this is who you're going to be, that this is how you're going to live. And you have to do it and be relentless for your entire life to say, yes, this is going to be harder. But in the end result, I just want something real. I want something real in my life, no matter what it costs, no matter what the suffering is, no matter what I wouldn't gain or I wouldn't have because I won't be dishonest or manipulative. That requires fortitude and character. And this is something that, people don't start out with, it's the kind of thing that has to be developed and worked on and built over a long period of time. But it's good, and it's worth it, all right? It really is worth it. No matter how alone you may end up in your life, you will not be alone when you have something real with your God. And he will make it known to you that there is an appreciation that he has when no one else has any appreciation for that whatsoever. So when Jesus expresses to Pilate that he is there as a king to present the truth to people, right? When he says that, this is an opportunity to have a relationship with Pilate, right? It's an opportunity. Will Pilate find that of interest? Will that be of value to him? Oh, we've got somebody here who has an interest in the truth. But that, is that what he's going to do? That's not what he did. He just gets up and walks off. Okay, what is truth? He gets up and just walks off. All right, so this does tell you a little bit about Pilate and about the opportunity that Jesus is going to have something real with Pilate. That obviously that's not what's going to happen. Okay, that's just not. We're not going there. That's not going to go anywhere. Jesus is alone. Okay, he's on his own now, and it's going to be quite clear really fast. And that's what Jesus did. He established the relationship between him and Pilate right away to understand that whatever this relationship is going to be, whatever these interactions are going to be, well, they're not going to be based on what's true. That's not how it's going to go. All right? Now, when Pilate says, what is truth? Let's keep going a little bit and get to that. In verse 38, Pilate said to him, What is truth? Now, this was not a question for Jesus to answer. It was just thrown out there. Because, and when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no fault in him at all. Right? So he doesn't stick around and have a conversation with Jesus about what is truth. He just goes out and tells the people, outside, I don't see anything wrong here. I don't see that he's done anything. We don't have that. We don't have that here. So he proclaims some truth, but he's going out there to try to have this relationship with these other people on the basis of truth. Is that what he's going to do? That there is no fault in him? He's really going to try that with these kinds of people? You really think telling them the truth is going to have any relevance at all? It doesn't. Telling these people the truth has no meaning. It's of no value whatsoever. This is not about the truth. This is about something else. All right, now let me tell you, let's go back to when Pilate walked away. One of the reasons why it's reasonable for him to just get up and walk away, what is truth? One of the reasons why is because in his kind of a position, the truth just doesn't have that much relevance. It doesn't have as much relevance as we would hope that it would have. Okay, in his kind of a position, what he is to do is he is to apply force. All right, that's what he's to do. He is there to solve problems with force. Okay, they've got swords, they've got bows and arrows, probably crossbows. They have spears. They have the modern technology of that time, right? Of that time, that was the modern weaponry, and they could use their weapons to cause harm to other people, and no one is going to get punished for applying the sword to somebody else. All right? His position and his responsibility is to use force in order to solve problems in the community. All right? That there are times when there are problems that just simply have to be solved, and the only way to solve those problems, usually because these other people are not going to solve this in a civilized way where you have conversations, you make agreements, and there's some honesty and some truth involved, and people actually do follow through with the agreements that they make. All right, when those kinds of things don't happen, well, then all you got left is force, and when people refuse to be honest, they refuse to make agreements that they're going to follow through with, well, then these are people that you just simply can only relate to on the basis of force. And they know this, and so they try to relate to other people in general on the basis of force, especially if their lies don't work out and their manipulations don't work out, and they can find no way to exercise blackmail or extortion, And so, Pilate's in the position of, well, he doesn't really have to use blackmail or extortion or manipulations. He doesn't have to just lie to people in order to get people to do things that he wants them to do. He just uses the sword. Says, you either do it or you're going to die, or we'll imprison you, or we'll sell you into slavery and you can go, somewhere else. We'll make some money off of you this way. That's what he does. Okay? And so in his kind of a position, it's no longer an issue of what is true. All right? It's no longer an issue of that. At that point, when there's no longer any regard for what's true or what isn't true, at that point, there are problems that have to be solved, and he will just make a decision and say, well, we don't care what the truth is. We are just going to solve it this way. This is how this issue is going to be solved, and it's force that is applied. So he has the power of the sword to the extent where he can execute people and solve problems that way. Everybody else, they have to use lies, manipulation, extortion, and blackmail. All right? That's what the tools are that everybody else gets to use in order to solve the problems of life. Okay? And so the truth has no relevance in any of this. The truth has no place in any of this. All right? I've had conversations with people, for example, where the topic of who I am as a person and what I believe, what my convictions might be, I've had conversations with people about this, and it's normal for me to respond and say, listen, I believe that there is a God. Let's just start there. I believe that there is a God. All right, now if we can make it past that, okay, of course, well, so what if there's a God? That's what the other person is thinking. The other person is usually thinking, okay, you believe that there's a God. So what? That has no relevance to them whatsoever. Okay, but if I can make it that far, then I'll give them the second part, which is that if there is a God, then considering this subject or this situation or whatever it is, he probably has an opinion about it. And I would like to know what that is. I would like to know what he thinks. In other words, what is important to me is what is the truth. That is what is important to me. And when I communicate with people on this level, it's normal. It's very unusual otherwise. It's normal for me to just get blanks, blank stares. They just ignore everything I say. This is normal. I've gotten used to it. And the reason why is because the only thing they're thinking about is what is the next lie they're going to tell me. That's all they're thinking about. What is the next lie they're going to bring up or say? Or how are they going to find some way to manipulate me? Or is there any way that they can extort me? Or is there any way that they can blackmail me? That's all that they're thinking. They just don't care about anything else. The only thing that matters, or how can they get me in court? How can they take me before a judge? And so a judge orders me because he's got the police, the guys with guns. So just as Pilate had the guys with swords, today we got the guys with guns. And it's the exact same thing. And, in a courtroom, nobody really cares about the truth. They talk about it as if it's really important, but nobody cares. There's people will get in there and just lie and lie and lie and lie. And the judge has to just get past all of that stuff and say, okay, look, we're not going to make a decision based on what's true. We have a problem here. How are we going to divide it up and figure out how to solve it? And then he just decides this is how we're going to solve it. And if you don't like it, I'll send guys with guns. And so these people, they believe that the only reason to communicate with anybody, to have any kind of relationship with anybody, is to lie to them, manipulate them, extort them, blackmail them, or take them to court so that they are forced into doing whatever it is you want. And so I will say to people sometimes, I will say, truth is not defined in a courtroom. That's not where truth is defined. Although, I understand that most people believe that that's where truth is defined. Whatever the court says, whatever the judge says, well, that now becomes truth. And it just isn't. It's just wishful thinking. It's not that. It's just absolute force. All right? And so I'm telling you all this, not so that you can get a better perspective of the world that you're really a part of, but to understand that this is the scenario that Jesus was in. This is why Pilate would just walk away over the idea of truth, because it doesn't have any relevance. It has no relevance to him at all. He has to make decisions and he has to force people to do stuff or die. That's who he is. That's his position. That's what he does. You're not going to be able to solve these issues with the people outside or even inside based on what's true. But that's what Jesus was there for. Jesus is there for the truth and to have relationships with people on the basis of truth. Well, then he's going to be alone. He is. He's going to be alone. And there's more coming. That's what happens next. What happens next? They're going to show him. They're going to show him that the truth has no relevance whatsoever. They're going to show him. We're going to show you. Okay, so you're a king from out of town. Well, we're going to show you. We're going to show you who's in charge here. We're going to show you the way we solve problems. We're going to show you who we are. We're going to show you what your relationship is going to be with all of us. Yeah, that's right. We're going to show you. We're going to torture you. That's what we're going to do. We're going to torture you. We're going to kill you. We're going to destroy you. We're going to take everything you got. We're going to show you. Okay, that's what's coming. All right, and this is normal. This is normal. It's always been like this. It's always going to be like this. All right, like I said, in the previous message, the only thing that's different today as it was back then is the technology. Back then they used swords, today they use guns. It's just a difference in technology, but the people are still the same. So, he goes out there and he says, I have found no fault with him at all. All right, now he's still got a problem to solve. What is he going to do with Jesus, and how is he going to solve this issue? He presents a solution. Okay? He presents a solution, and it, of course, has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with Jesus. All right? He presents a solution, and something that maybe they would be okay with. He says in verse 39, but you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews? All right, now I just spoke about this idea of him being the King of the Jews. That is a true statement, but it's not all there is to say about it. He is the King of all, not just the Jews. Verse 40, then they all cried out, they all cried again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was a robber. All right, he was a guy who took stuff from other people and probably applied a tremendous amount of force in order to do so. Okay, so this is the solution that Pilate presents, and the people reject it. All right, now what's going on here with this idea of every year at the Passover we release somebody? Why would they do that? What's that about? You would think that would be wrong, to release somebody, especially if they really did something wrong. Like Barabbas, for example. This guy was a thief. He was causing harm to the community. Shouldn't he be there? What about the two thieves on the cross next to Jesus? It appears that, at least in some circumstances, people like this were executed by crucifixion. So, what's this about, right? What was this about? Well, the release of a prisoner at this time, especially once a year, was a way of maintaining some more civility, a sense of civility to try to increase the civility between the two communities. You've got the Jewish community and you've got the Roman community. And the Romans were in the position of authority there, and I explained how this worked out and why in the previous message. But in order to try to maintain some sense of civility, to increase the quality of relations, improve relations between the two communities, this was a way to do this, all right? Because there is no perfect judicial system, especially when you recognize that nobody cares about the truth in general, right? Of course, there are some times when it's important. I don't want to say that in an absolute sense, of course. But in this case, we have a system, the Romans system, which is not going to be perfect, which means that there will be situations when people are held in the Roman compound and they are punished by the Romans, and they shouldn't be. All right? That's the way it goes. Now, the Mosaic law was structured in a way that it was better for a person to be released who was guilty than it was for someone to be punished who was innocent. Okay, that was the Mosaic law and how it was defined, so that a person who was innocent would have a very low probability of being punished for something that they didn't do. But the consequences of that would be that there would be people who would be released and not punished even though they did do something wrong. All right, and so that's how that was structured. Now, in the Roman system, it's not necessarily going to work out that way. It could be that they changed things a little bit and said, it's fine if people are punished for something that they didn't do, just to increase the likelihood, increase the percentage of people who are going to be punished for things that they really did do. All right? And there are different attitudes that people can have. They can have an attitude like, well, this person isn't really guilty of this, but they're probably guilty of something, so let's punish them anyway just because. There must be something that they've done that they deserve. They deserve this. Everyone is evil kind of thing. And especially from the government's point of view, everyone who they rule over is a criminal, and that's just how they will relate to their people sometimes. So in this kind of a situation, when there could be people who are being punished and yet they shouldn't be, this is a way for the population, for the leadership in the Jewish community to set someone free who really should be set free. All right? It's a way of getting an innocent person out of a situation. It's a way of saving someone who shouldn't be punished anyway. All right? Who would otherwise be harmed in a way that they certainly did not deserve. So this would be a way in order to try to offset the weaknesses of the Roman legal system. A way of offsetting the weaknesses of the Roman legal system. Once a year, we'll just let somebody go. You guys figure out who this person should be. So Pilate tries to use this situation to solve the current problem. And of course, it would be the perfect application because Jesus has not done anything wrong. So, every year we release someone who we probably all know has done nothing wrong. Here you go. Here's a chance. Here's your chance to release somebody. And for him to say, the King of the Jews, that is special, all right? That's unique. Because what he's saying is he's saying, all right, listen, maybe this guy is the King of the Jews. And maybe there is going to be some sedition. Maybe there is going to be a conflict that we're going to have to deal with. Even though, he's given me the assurance that he's not there to pick a fight, So let's go ahead and I'll offer him up, I'll offer him as somebody who you can have, you can have the King of the Jews. You guys can have this king. Obviously, you don't want us to be your king. And this guy says he's going to be the king and yet not cause death. We're not going to have a war over this king. Maybe he's going to be a good king for you to have. How about that? And he'd be okay with Jesus being a king as long as he's not going to start a war. Because nobody's going to want a war, except maybe the guys out of the front gate. All right, there are situations when people are would want war, especially if they're not going to be the ones who go out and fight it. Okay, yeah. So Pilate offers this solution as a legitimate way of solving the problem. We release somebody who shouldn't be punished anyway every year. So we got somebody, let's release him. How about this? And they say no. They say no, we don't want the person who shouldn't be punished. We want the person who should be punished. That's who we want. Right? I mean, you cannot negotiate with people like this. You can't have a healthy, productive relationship with a person like that, with people like this. I mean, it just isn't going to happen. There's no way to deal with people like that except to apply force. Because that's what they're about. They're about applying force. Okay, if that's how you want to do it, that's the only way you're going to do it, then that's our relationship. It's a relationship based on who's going to force who to do what. I mean, that's how people really are. Now, look, they're not going to just tell you that that's who they are. They're not going to tell you that. You'll eventually find out. Okay, and they'll try to delay it as long as possible until the point that the moment comes when that has to be exercised. And then you're going to get the sense of it. You're going to get the sense that either you comply with whatever they desire, or they're going to hurt you. They have ways. There are ways, and they will hurt you. So it becomes a relationship based on extortion. You will either do what I want, or I will hurt you, or maybe there's some blackmail involved. You will do what I want, or I'll hurt you because of something you did, kind of thing. And when you discover that you have a relationship with a person like that, in order to get out of it, you just might have to just go ahead and take all the pain and suffering that they will force upon you just to get out of that. Don't stay in a relationship like that. Get out of the relationship like that. Get out of it. And do your best not to get into another one that's kind of similar. Because that's, how these people are. So they say, yeah, give us the person who deserves to be punished, and you punish this guy who doesn't deserve to. Why? Because he's exposing the truth. He's a guy who tells the truth. That's it. He's a guy who tells the truth, and because of that, he makes us feel uncomfortable. He makes us feel like we're at risk, So we need to hurt this guy. And folks, this is not unusual. If you have people all around you who, given the opportunity, would absolutely do this. Absolutely, given the opportunity. It doesn't happen very often because those opportunities don't show themselves very often. But given the opportunity, you bet. Oh, yes, they will yes, absolutely. Would they get involved in something like that? Yeah. All right. So they asked for Barabbas. And I mentioned just briefly a moment ago the idea that they kill thieves, right? They crucify two of them. When Jesus was crucified, he had he had two thieves there with him on the cross. One of them, he said, "You'll go to heaven with me," and he didn't say that to the other guy. Right? All right. It could be that third cross was there for Barabbas. It could be that was the case, and that sure enough, they put Jesus on the cross that Barabbas should have been put on. All right. But yes, please recognize that this is the way people are, that they really want dishonesty to be the preeminent way that they have relationships with other people. They do not want the truth, and if somebody is of the truth, yeah, they want them to be punished for being a person of the truth. Absolutely. All right, let me move forward from there. This is the end of John chapter 18. In verse 40 again, then they all cried again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. Okay, so that's it. There's nothing that Pilate can do from this kind of a situation. Let's go ahead and move forward into chapter 19, verse 1. In chapter 19, verse 1, so then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. All right, so he ripped his flesh apart. Let's just say it the way it really is. So Pilate went in there and he ripped Jesus' flesh apart. What a guy. Okay? That's what we're going to do now. All right, now what is going on here? So we're going to go in and we're going to tear Jesus' flesh apart and make him bleed. That's scourging. That's what that is. All right, that's what we're going to do. And why would he do that? Well, you're going to see that he's going to present Jesus to the people and say, okay, that's what we have going on here. You brought this guy over here so that he would be hurt. Okay? Here he is. He's been hurt. Is this good enough for you? So Pilate is going to participate in this even. He's going to hurt somebody who doesn't deserve it. Okay? You've got all these people who brought Jesus up here because they want him to be hurt. Now, what did he do? He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. And so if they hurt him, is this going to cause a problem in these people's lives? All these people who are out there at the front door, at the front gate, who aren't going to go into the compound, all these people out there, what difference is it really going to make if Jesus is hurt or not? If Jesus is not hurt, do they lose anything? Are they going to suffer anything? Is there any loss on their part? No. No, if Jesus is not hurt, these people don't lose anything. If Jesus is hurt, they still don't lose anything. Right? I mean, what Pilate does to Jesus has no relevance to these people's lives at all. They know it. He knows it. Everybody knows it. It just doesn't have any relevance. This has nothing to do with whether Jesus is hurt or not. These are just wicked, evil people who have an opportunity to apply force and cause harm to somebody else, and so they want to take it. I mean, that's the way people can be. Give them the opportunity, and you bet they will take it. They're going to get away with it. They don't lose anything either way. If it doesn't happen, so what? If it does happen, so what? Now we can feel good about ourselves. Now, if it does happen, we can feel like we've really accomplished something. Now, we're important people, because we applied force to someone else, whether they deserved it or not. It doesn't matter. We did that. We are powerful. We have accomplished something great. That's how these people think. It is. It's absolutely absurd and it's insane. But hey, that's the way the world is. So Pilate takes him and rips his flesh apart. And then what? We keep reading. Verse 2, and the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him with their hands. All right, so they beat him up, ripped him up ripped up his skin, made him bleed a lot, stuck thorns into his head, and it does not appear that they removed those, and so the pain will continue. And then in verse 4, Pilate then went out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him." Okay, now the way that he has described this is to say, okay, so I just tortured the guy and he wouldn't admit to anything. Right? So you guys won't tell me what he did wrong. And he wouldn't tell me what he did wrong. And so I tortured him, hoping that he would eventually break and say, okay, this is what I did. The pain is too much. So this is what I did. Will you stop it or get on with what, you would do if I really did do something? And that didn't happen. All right? So he tortured the guy to try to get him to confess to something. And Jesus did not confess to anything because there wasn't anything to confess to. He's a man of the truth. So Pilate brings him out and says, look, I don't see anything wrong. I find no fault. I have searched by torture. I have searched to see if he would confess to anything. Anything, And he wouldn't do that. So Pilate did his torture thing, and they can see him, right? There he is. Is this enough? Right? I mean, is this enough for you? Have we hurt this guy enough? Unjustifiably, of course. I mean, can you really feel good about yourself now? Can you? Can you feel like you're an important person? Can you feel like you're valuable? Can you punish me for exposing the truth kind of thing? Have you hurt this guy enough? Is it enough? Look at this guy. He's been ripped to shreds. He's got thorns poking into his head. He's been beaten. Is that no, it's not enough. No. Right? No. That's what they say. Let's see what they say. They say next. Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, "Behold the man!" Therefore, when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And Pilate said to them, "You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him." Right? Now, this is obvious. That's verse 6. This is obviously not Pilate giving them permission, saying, you guys now have the authority to go and crucify this guy, which is an exceptionally painful way to die. All right? I mean, this is a brutal, vicious way to die. All right? And he says, you guys go do it. He doesn't say that in the sense of you now have my permission, right? Because they don't. If they dare It's a dare. If they dare go do that, well, then they're going to probably be faced with crucifixion as well. Otherwise, of course, they would have taken him and crucified him. Of course. Oh, thank you. Because we want to do it by our own hands. By our own hands, even, we want to murder this guy kind of thing. That's the kind of people who he was talking to. Or, okay, perhaps, maybe there's a possibility that they were thinking, no, we don't want it to be known that we did that because everybody knows that we will have then committed murder. All right, so we want you to commit murder. You commit the murder so that we're not responsible. We're not guilty. We did not sin. You did. You crucify him. You crucify him. All right, that's the most likely situation or scenario or thought that would be going through most of their minds, I suppose. I'll recognize that that's a good possibility. Okay, but that's their response. No, he has not. He has not been hurt. He made me feel uncomfortable. He told the truth about me. Oh, how dare he? How dare he speak the truth about me? Crucify him. Crucify him. That's what's going on here. Folks, you got to see it. That's the way people are. Really. Obviously not everyone, but there are those few, okay? And those are the few who could be candidates for having a relationship with God. That's how it goes. That's how it's always been. All right? But that's verse 6. Again, in verse 6, therefore, when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, you take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. And then in verse 7, the Jews answered him, we have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. All right? We have a law because he declared that he is the Son of God, or even that he just declared that he was God, which is to declare that he is the Son of God is by default, all right, the same thing. So that's their law. So Pilate told them you go judge him by your law. And they said, well, this is what he's done. They finally give the accusation, right? They finally expose, this is what he's done. He said that he's the Son of God. All right, so, what if I say that I'm somebody? What if you say that you're somebody? I mean, what happens if you at your next family gathering, perhaps, you've got your family hanging out there for Easter, Christmas, whatever, and you say, folks, I got an announcement to make. I am the Son of God. Or, let's just make it a little bit more interesting and say, I am God. What are these people going to think? Are they going to think you have to be put to death? That's not what they're going to think. They're going to think, you're crazy. All right, you're nuts. You're not living in reality. And if you want to continue with this assertion because you really want to convince us that this is who you are, we're just going to have to get you out of our life. All right, but it doesn't mean that you have to be executed, right? I mean, now there is a law of blasphemy in the scriptures, and the definition of blasphemy is to declare you want oneself to be God. And in doing that, you are definitely denying the reality of God. And God said, look, that is something that is worthy of death. You want to deny the reality of God by saying that you are God? Well, that's just out of bounds according to the Mosaic law. And that was important to God to do that. And I'm sure that was performed on occasion, right? We have an example of that taking place in the scriptures. Somebody cursed God, and in the cursing, in effect, indirectly perhaps, he was declaring himself to be God in some way. Or he was just simply wanting to say that God is the source of all the problems of life. We don't have enough detail to know exactly what was happening. This is found in Leviticus. But it's enough, okay? And in here, we have an example where they say, this guy claims to be God or the Son of God. And so, because what's the big deal? So let him go around saying that he's the Son of God. Who eventually, nobody's going to have anything to do with him probably, right? Well, except for the fact that this guy's raising the dead. Okay, and healing the blind. Some other things that only God could do. Maybe that's a problem. He's doing things that only God can do, and he's letting people know that he's God. I suppose it's okay if he does things that only God could do, as long as he doesn't tell people that he's God. Then that makes it okay. Maybe, you can't negotiate this. There's no way to resolve this. All right, but this becomes the accusation. All right, so now we finally have an accusation. So now, I suppose, we can have a trial. All right, now we've got something that maybe we can work with. And so that's what happens next. So I will have to present this in the next message. I'll have to pause here. This is a good place to pause. I have a question for those of you who are using these messages for your small groups that you could perhaps use in order to facilitate some conversation. What does it mean for Jesus' kingdom to not be of this world? All right? If Jesus says that his kingdom, if Jesus says that his kingdom is not of this world, then what will that really mean? How would that really have an effect on the way that we perceive the world that we're a part of, or how that he interacts with the world? And then the follow-up question with that is then what is the world for? All right, and I spoke about this a little bit early in this message. What is the world for? And what does it mean for him to say that his kingdom is not of this world? What would that kind of imply? And so how would that maybe change the way that we interact with the world that we're a part of? All right, so I do hope that this is helpful, and I will continue into John chapter 19 in the next message. Thanks.